Don't forget to rate our show and subscribe.
Before we begin this podcast, if you or someone you know is in crisis or needs emotional support, there are tools that can help. So get yourself a pen and paper or open a note-taking app on your phone or computer. Feel free to pause this episode while you get yourself ready. The episode starts at 1 minute and 52 seconds. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. You can text 45645, which is coming in the fall of 2023. In Canada, you can also call 988, the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. The Trans Lifeline in Canada is 1-877-330-6366. And in the United States, 1-877-565-8860, or call 911. You are not alone, and you do not have to be alone. I would like to honor and recognize the traditional and unceded territories of the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo nations on whose territory I live, work, and play. Welcome to We Are the ADHD Family Podcast. This podcast is meant to chronicle our journey with ADHD, autism, and other discoveries along the way. I reach out to advocates, experts, individuals, and other families that want to raise their voices and empower those on their journey. My name is Mark Smeets, and I am passionate about removing barriers for others through creating connections and building on strengths and practical problem solving. I am married to Siobhan, a parent of 2 wonderful kids, and all of us have ADHD. I want you to feel like you have power and hope. And now, into the episode. Welcome to the next episode of We Are the ADHD Family. I figured it was time to get into part 2 of our origin. It's a big episode, and it's a heavy episode. I also wanted to make sure that there were a lot of practical tips that you can walk away with. And I also want to give you a super brief summary of really the reason why things took as long as they did. In essence, the pediatrician faxed over a doctor's referral to Sunnyhill. Sunnyhill never received it. There was no due diligence done on the part of the pediatrician's office or Sunnyhill until my wife and I got involved. So that began the back and forth between myself, the pediatrician, and Sunnyhill to have them fax everything over. And that is what took so long. It's weird to sum something up in less than 30 seconds, but that's what this episode is going to be about. We are not the only family in this situation. I know there's others. All you have to do is join one of the Facebook groups that are out there, and you'll meet families every single day as they post their struggles. Instead of diving into the story first, I want to start this whole episode with my closing advice. I don't want to make you wait till the end to hear this because I think and feel that it's pretty important that I state this now. And it's equally important to state that these items I'm about to read are in no particular order. The importance of them is all number 1 in my books. Number 1, document, 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 document some more, and just keep documenting. When it comes to appointments and timeframes, do the best job you can to document those things. If I had to do it all over again, or if my wife and I had to do it all over again, we'd probably get a simple old school calendar, one of those foldable ones you get at the dollar store, and put your doctor's appointments and dates in that. Using the iPhone, it's fantastic, but I have no idea how to get the old stuff out of there. This is where technology kind of sucks in that sense. If you're documenting traits and things that you see, don't change how you document it. Put it in an Excel file. It's probably the easiest way to do it. Word document. If you want to write a database, write a database. The world's your oyster as far as options for that. So there's my first piece of advice. Document it. Document your emails. Print those out. Keep those. Anytime someone says something, follow up with an email to say, here's what I take our conversation to mean, and this is what you said, this is what I said, and this is what we agreed with or not agreed with. That's the information you want to keep. Number 2, if you're on a wait list, call the destination and confirm that the referral that the office sent was actually received. If you can't reach them, because some offices are like that, then convince your doctor's office or whoever you're dealing with to call that other location and confirm with someone, a human, that it was actually received. There's a reason I'm saying this. Many offices still use fax machines. Don't just get the fax confirmation. I mean, get that part of it. That's good. But have someone on the other side actually confirm that the referral was received. A human voice. I had a friend that went through a similar situation to us, and they were missing the fax as well. They just had a shorter time frame take place than we did. Number three, if a provider you are dealing with does not want to see your information, hear your complaints, tries to brush you and your concerns off, doesn't want to see anything you've documented or anything like that, complain. And then number two, if that doesn't go in your favor, ask for a second opinion, something not to do with them. And if that person doesn't want to see that information, get a third opinion. Don't stop until you're satisfied that you have exhausted the answers that you were wanting to get. Again, it's your gut that's telling you that this is the right path for these things. Listen to it. If someone says to you, number four, if someone says to you that they don't want to diagnose, you can't see my air quotes, X, or whatever disability it is, whether it's ADHD, Down syndrome, who knows, because there is no funding for it, lodge a complaint with the organization or go above them. If a school doesn't want to give your child a designation, go to the school district. If a doctor says they don't want to diagnose such and such, go above them to the College of Physicians or something like that. It really does suck to start an episode or something like this with talking about those four critical things. Actually, 5 things. I know you're probably tired. I know you're probably exhausted emotionally, physically, spiritually. I see your pain. My family has been through this. We get it. If you don't have a support network, build one. And that can be anything. Be gentle on yourself. You are doing the best that you can. A tiny bit of relationship advice from myself. My wife and I don't swear at each other. We're pretty respectful. We don't have big, huge arguments. Yeah, we get mad. Everybody does. You kidding? I drive her crazy. It's the little things that really count and make a difference when times are really stressed. For any partner, I'm not going to make it too gender-based here, bring flowers, bring a card, leave a little note. In that note, say how much you appreciate what they do, how proud you are of them, how much you love them. Anything that is supportive and contributes to your relationship. Don't forget, you have a relationship with your spouse. Protect it. You are a team. You have to treat this as a team. You will come out stronger. And trust me, your kids will notice that you two are strong together. Don't compare relationships either. Your relationship will not look like our relationship. If you swear at each other, okay, that might be a thing that you guys just do. My wife and I don't. Know what is respectful for both of you. And that goes for if you're in a same-sex marriage as well. And it's time to laugh because I did forget something. Just a perspective. The reason we want to push is this is going to apply if your child is under 6 in the province of BC. Getting something like an autism diagnosis and pushing for it, that means there's funding available. And I believe it's $22,000 a year. After your child is turned 6, you are brought down to, I think $6,000 a year. We went for our first initial assessment at 4 years, 8 months. And that would have landed us in the 22,000 range. Well, we're not exactly rich people here. We struggle just like you do. That's a lot of money that was left on the table as a result of that person, the way that initial diagnosis came out, but also because, we were just wiped. And if there is one regret I do have, it's that. It's not pushing hard enough for it. And maybe that's the wrong word to use, and maybe I'm just not being as kind to myself or ourselves. It was a bitter pill to swallow to know that we didn't have access to something like that we could help our son out. So just think of the money that's left on the table, and that's in itself is worth a fight. Let's dive into the story. I'm going to cast a big net for this, and basically we're going to rewind and go before Rage Night. One thing that has made this challenging, as I've mentioned on another podcast episode, was we have awesome records of all the traits and events that we've gone through with Owen. The one thing that was really hard to figure out were the doctor's appointment dates and where we could find half that stuff. A lot of it's in, iPhone calendars and all that, but how to look that stuff up in the past, I have no idea. Couldn't even tell you. But that has made tracking certain appointments and milestones a little bit on the tricky side. So I could tell you the date and time that he ate black beans out of the chili, which is kind of a foodie miracle there for us. But can I remember the exact date we met our pediatrician and all that? No, I can't. Again, we'll go with broad strokes, and any years or months, we're going to use those as just general reference guides. And as I tell this story, the one thing I want you to keep in mind is that, again, my wife and I didn't know anything about this. We didn't understand dysregulation. We didn't understand the meltdowns. We didn't understand why he was lining up objects, the aggression, the violence, the transitions. We got none of that. No one came along and said, this is what's going on. We figured it out the absolute hardest way that was probably possible. And that made for a very stressful, emotionally challenging time. And I promise one final thing before jumping into all this. As hard as things were, there were a lot of really, really good times. And I want to save that for an episode because it really did change the way that we parent and we look at things. And I know I look at things, I'm just speaking for me. Pretty awesome. Just some of the positive things that we've experienced with O, and why we love him so much and why we fight so hard for him. At the end of this episode, I'm going to take the points that I mentioned a minute ago, and I'm going to put those at the end. That's what I want you to walk away with after listening to this story. Just talking briefly about Owen's life in the beginning, we knew something was odd and out of place. The process of conceiving Owen and having him born was really tough. We nearly lost him twice. Again, it's another episode. And when he was born, we were happy. It was pretty amazing. Here's our son. This is great. We noticed things were odd when we couldn't put him down after Siobhan had breastfed him. And I know some people will say, oh, you just have to put him down and walk away. Well, yeah, he'd never stop crying. It's like he could not be away from Siobhan. Let's not get into separation anxiety. Let's not try and figure it out. It was just something wasn't right. And I can't tell you the number of times that I wish, as a man, I had boobs and could produce milk, so I could take the pressure off of my wife, who was sitting in a rocking chair all night with our son. We couldn't put him down, so they'd pass out in the rocking chair together. For me, being the way that I am, and sort of the guy that always wants to do something, I couldn't do anything. I felt completely helpless. So did Siobhan, for that matter. Sure, nurturing our son, but she couldn't get a break either. Other things began to happen as Owen grew. Things like this is when we began to see the odd behavior, lining things up, the head shakes, tippy-toe walking, sleep. Again, another completely different episode. Just the typical things that you begin to see with autistic kids kick in. When Owen was around 3 or 4, and I can't remember the age that this started at, we were seeing a speech pathologist who was awesome. She had a fantastic connection with O. One thing that we loved is that Owen didn't hide from her. He loved playing. He was very comfortable with her. She was comfortable with him. She was the one who told us that she started noticing the traits. Being behind in speech wasn't one of those signs. It was a part of it, but there was more. I even have a recording of the assessment so I could refer to it back. And I'm glad that I have that because it helped me down the road. With our struggles that we were having and our lack of knowledge, all these little pieces that seemed out of place, when she suggested that he was on the spectrum and we started doing research, things started to fit into place. We eventually went to find a pediatrician, and when we did, of course, you need a doctor's referral. I had known my family doctor since I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I trusted him. But there was a problem. He didn't see the problem. I remember that there was one time we took Owen for a doctor's visit, and it was after we had the speech report. We brought this to his attention, and when we were going to leave, when it was all done, the appointment itself, it was an epic meltdown. He screamed his head off, and as we tried to get out the door, he was actually holding on to the door frame of not wanting to leave. And then he put himself on the ground and was kicking and screaming in the office. Yeah, it felt pretty bad at that point. And our doctor just chalked it up to a tantrum. We didn't understand transitions at this point, obviously. And if I remember correctly, when we got down to the car, where I parked, there is a sidewalk, and Owen was just pacing up and down the sidewalk and refused to get in the car. If you're thinking, hey, why don't you just pick him up and strap him into his car seat? That's not the kindest way to treat a child, to be honest. I think the only way we got him into the car was by saying we were going to go for McDonald's. The entire reason we went into that initial doctor's appointment was to talk about the speech results and some of the concerns. But again, we didn't feel that supported. We did find a pediatrician, and I remember calling our doctor's secretary, who I had a pretty good relationship with, and I asked her, could you please send over the referral to the pediatrician? I didn't want to have a discussion with my doctor about it. I just knew it was the right thing to do and just to get it done. And that's exactly what happened. I believe we waited about a year to get into our pediatrician's office. Our first meeting, if I remember correctly, was just my wife and I. We didn't have any of the kids there. I'm pretty sure Mackenzie wasn't born yet. She gave us some forms to fill out, authors and books to read and look at, and that's exactly what we did. We just added all that more research to our list to keep educating ourselves. When we brought Owen in to see her on the second visit, he didn't hide anything at all, which was wonderful. When we entered the office and we went into the doctor's room, wasn't exactly a big room. I remember the first thing he did was to hide in the back corner of the room behind the chairs, behind Siobhan, and he was scared. He didn't want to come out. Eventually, he did come out. Can't remember how he did it, but he began to rearrange and line up all the chairs that we were sitting in. And the three of us, myself, my wife, and the pediatrician, we watched as he did this. And my wife and I are just looking at each other, just going, see? It was nice to have our pediatrician witness this. Because, again, we had no idea what the hell was going on. And quite honestly, neither did she. And it was a wonderful moment because probably for the first time, I think my wife and I both felt validated and we felt seen, that there was something more going on. Siobhan and I found a clinic that did diagnoses right by our home. And so we had the referral put in, and I believe we waited about 6 months to actually get into the appointment. And the appointment date, and I know this for a fact, was October of 2018. As usual with these things, there's more forms to fill out, and we already had the speech report done, but we gave our forms to our daycare, and they had plenty of time to fill them out. And we were reassured that everything would be filled out. Daycare didn't fill out the forms until the very last minute. The site director had asked the staff to watch for things, but the staff members were basically saying, we don't have time. There aren't enough of us. We have to keep an eye on the kids. There's no time to fill in paperwork. And this is what I was told directly. She essentially put down that everything was quote unquote fine, partly because Owen wasn't violent and there wasn't any fighting happening or something like that. It's not that he was an angry kid that came to daycare and he was beating kids up. It wasn't like that. He was a child that learned how to mask, and unless you knew what to look for, the subtleties, like if I looked now at, and this was somebody else's child in that same state, I would have a better chance of picking these things out. But it was really annoying when daycare essentially shirked the responsibility to do this, because that could have been the end of this story, and it wasn't. One thing I wish I had done was to print out all the emails and brought that documentation with me. At this point, again, if I remember correctly, we were already emailing daycare when Owen would have a rough night, rough morning, and would say, hey, heads up, he's coming in, he's really upset. Do what you can to calm him down, and so forth. I would love to have printed those things and brought them with me as something physical to present. Not just as a anecdotal story to make it seem like that, we were hysterical parents, but it gives you something physical and tangible to hand over. Eventually, we got the forms. They were filled out, and we went to the meeting. I remember the car ride over to the clinic because the clinic's it's a 5-minute car ride, depending on traffic. It was that close to the house. And honestly, we thought we won the lottery because we didn't have to go very far. I remember feeling cautiously optimistic that things were going to work out. We knew that there was all this funding available. Our hopes were up. The name of the place that we chose was called Able, and it received awesome reviews on Facebook, and lots of parents had good experiences. There's a whole bunch of different locations and a whole bunch of different people that work there. So there's no point me bringing up this doctor's name. I'm sure this clinic has got good people working for them. As optimistic as we were feeling, we were both nervous, and we went in, had our meeting, and explained how things were supposed to go. 2-hour interview, we'll observe the child, we'll do some games and play some tests. And because Owen was only 4 years old, it's not like we could leave him with her. Legally, you have to be in the room. The first part of an assessment like this is to do the parent interview. So the doctor will ask you what your concerns are, what questions do you have, what's the reason for the visit. And if you've never done the assessment before, you'll get asked questions that are basically out of the diagnostic manual, the DSM. What repetitive actions do you see? What's the rigid behavior? Things of that nature. Typically, they're long conversations. They're not short, far from it. There are a lot of things that my wife and I said, yes, we've seen this, yes, we've seen that. There were also a lot of things that, looking back now, we didn't realize that was a thing. And I'm struggling to find an example of that. But you don't know what you don't know a lot of the times. And until you've committed the diagnostic manual to memory, how are you supposed to know? That's what, these medical professionals are for. When it came time to do Owen's visit and his part of the assessment, I was with him, Siobhan was at work, and he didn't hide anything that day. So just like the pediatrician's office where he rearranged all the chairs, he couldn't move this furniture, but he was running. The room isn't that big of a room, but there was a couch, a love seat, some toys, the doctor's desk and stuff, and he would just jump on the couch, jump on the love seat, go upside down on the love seat, upside down on the couch, and he just ran around the room. And that was what we were watching. Every single time the doctor would call him over, like to say, hey, let's work on this. He would stop, come over, do whatever the task was, and then he'd go back to running. Now, at this point, I'm laughing because I'm laughing inside. And the reason I'm laughing inside is because, again, someone is seeing what we're going through and how you couldn't really get him to stop running or anything like that, or climbing on the furniture or something of that nature. It wasn't going to happen. And I feel like it's important to point out that I wasn't going to stop him either. For the final interview, I said, I have videos on this USB that I'd like you to take a look at. I proceeded to give her the USB, and then she turned around to me and said, no, that's okay. I don't need that. I said, no, I really want you to look at this. And then she said, but then I'd have to bill you for the extra time, and I understand money's tight. And I said, I don't care. That part doesn't matter to me. We want this done right the first time. And so she says, if I have time, I'll take a look at it. Okay, fine. I thought she was going to look at it. We finish off the final meeting, and then we had to wait about 2 weeks for the final report. So I'd like to put a pause here and call this part 1. The next episode will have the second half of this story, and there is a lot more to come. And the next episode will begin exactly where we left off, announcing the results of the first assessment.
Thank you for listening to our show.
How many bookmarks do you have in your web browser that you say, hey, I'm going to check that out later, but you still haven't done it? And they've been there for at least a year or longer. If you're hearing this message, you've reached the end of the episode, and for that, I want to say thank you. I hope you have enjoyed what you've heard and are walking away with newfound knowledge.
We are the ADHD family.
See you soon for a new episode. I have 3 things to ask of you. Number 1, if you have any comments, questions, or guest ideas, please leave a comment on the Facebook page. Number 2, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps people find us. And number 3, if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone who would make a great guest, contact me through our Facebook page. This podcast is open to everyone. You don't need to be an expert, just passionate and want to see change. The opinions expressed by the host and guest are not associated with any employer or organization unless otherwise stated. Any medical information on this site and podcast is provided as an information resource only and is not to be used or relied on for any diagnostic or treatment purposes. This information does not create any patient-physician relationship and should not be used as a substitute for a professional diagnosis and treatment. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any healthcare decisions or guidance about a specific medical condition. The show, host, and its guests expressly disclaim responsibility and shall have no liability for any damages, loss, injury, or liability whatsoever suffered as a result of your reliance on the information contained in this site or show. By visiting this site and listening to this show, you agree to the terms and conditions, which may from time to time change or be supplemented by the show host.